Alright folks, buckle up. A savvy black woman in a Bentley gets pulled over thanks to some old-school bias. Then she flips the script on the power-tripping cop with her FBI badge. Goosebumps, right? In broad daylight, Clean to Rot is unmasked, forged files are exposed, and corruption gets dragged into the light. This isn't a comedy skit, it's a harsh reality check on abuse of power. If you believe in real-deal American justice, comment 1. If you think it's just another slick move, comment 2, and subscribe so you're front row for the next episode. It all went down one late afternoon, with golden sunlight still dancing on car roofs and the air heavy with the faint aroma of sidewalk coffee. The mall parking lot, usually alive with the click of shopping carts and the hum of engines, fell utterly silent when Officer Victor Shaw suddenly bellowed, "How does a black woman end up driving a luxury Bentley? She must be a thief." His words struck like a thunderclap on a clear day, stopping everyone in their tracks and trading looks of shock and unease. What no one realized was that the woman clutching her coffee and waiting to pay for gas was no ordinary shopper, but Naomi Ellis, an undercover FBI agent. Her calm, exterior-neatly tied-back curls, soft gray shirt, khakis masked the steely resolve in her eyes. Shaw strode forward, his gaze snapping from her face to the gleaming white Bentley, as though seeking proof for his baseless accusation. "Prove that this is your car," he demanded, voice thick with assumption. Unfazed, Naomi produced her keys and registration from her shirt pocket in one smooth motion, her composure a stark contrast to his flustered indignation. A collective "ooh" rippled through the onlookers, yet none dared approach to help. They stood frozen, like startled birds on a wire. In that pregnant pause, a pressing question hung in the air. Was justice still a shield for the vulnerable here? Or had it become a toy in the hands of the powerful? Shaw fumbled for his radio, labeling her a suspected car thief, despite spotless paperwork. Naomi, with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced far greater dangers, did not argue. She simply raised her hands to rest on the hood as ordered, bracing herself for the next scene in this unfolding drama. The distant wail of sirens and the thud of patrol cars breaking into the lot edged closer. Crowds of witnesses, from elderly shoppers with grocery carts to teens filming on their phones closed in to watch. Every gesture, every fixed stare, recorded the moment when power was displayed not to protect but to intimidate. Few knew that this tense confrontation was just the overture to a far larger saga. One woman's courage would ignite a fight to reclaim dignity and justice for all those crushed by prejudice and abuse of authority. And in that charged parking lot, under the fading afternoon sun, the stage was set for a reckoning that would rock the very foundations of the system. The story picks up the moment the late afternoon sun slants across the shopping center's metal awnings, as Naomi Ellis steps out of the store with a steaming cup of coffee in hand. Her simple outfit on ash-gray button-up and khaki trousers betrays no hint that she is an undercover FBI agent. In the quiet parking lot, Officer Victor Shaw strides forward, his voice heavy with presumption. "Black women rarely own a white Bentley. Did you borrow it or steal it?" He snatches her registration papers, demanding verification, as though his badge alone grants him the power to suspect and punish an innocent civilian. In that instant, Naomi's mind flashes back to her childhood. She remembers being the only brown-skinned girl invited to the chalkboard in elementary school, only to overhear parents whispering that her scholarship must have been special treatment. She recalls her mother, an expert seamstress, staying up late stitching scraps into clothes for her, and her father, a former soldier, telling her tales of battle, teaching her that a courageous heart and steady shoulders would carry her through any injustice. As she grew, Naomi channeled that drive into burning the midnight oil, earning top grades, winning entrance to Harvard and then Yale, and finally joining the FBI to fight prejudice from within. When Shaw snarls, "Show me your papers," Naomi remains composed. She calmly produces her keys and the vehicle registration, her gaze unwavering. Every slight from her youth, the dismissive remarks, the suspicious glances, the unspoken "you don't belong," was forged into fuel. She mastered martial arts, studied the law, and conquered every grueling exercise at the academy and on the shooting range. Under the skewed golden light, she hands Shaw the documents, each movement deliberate, a silent declaration. I am not here just to comply. I carry the voice of millions of people of color who have been oppressed, silenced by fear. She locks eyes with him, unflinching, refusing to shrink or submit to his authority. Shaw hesitates, radio unslung, before his backup team rushes in, sirens murmuring in the near distance. Bystanders step back yet record every second on their phones, screens flickering bright against the dusk. In that tableau, justice transcends theory. It lives in her hands, scarred by discrimination, and, in her resolute eyes, simple yet razor-sharp. Naomi's journey has only just begun, like an undercurrent swelling to the brink of eruption. And as she braces against the hood for the next verification, onlookers realize a profound paradox. In a nation that claims freedom, a black woman still must fight to prove her right to exist before blind power. The story picks up right after Shaw snatched Naomi's paperwork and keyed his radio. I need backup down here. A suspected car thief, black female, about 30, likely forged docs. His tone was clipped, banking on a familiar narrative. If you don't cooperate, you'll learn exactly how much power the badge grants me. Hands on the hood, Shaw barked, and Naomi complied without protest. She pressed her palms onto the cold metal, fingers splayed, muscles tense. Her back arched as instructed, face pressed against the chilly surface, feeling every subtle vibration as Shaw prowled around her. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her mind raced. Every second is evidence, every motion a piece of the truth I'm gathering. Bystanders pulled out their phones, the camera shutters clicking in the background. Shaw's partner stomped closer, flipping through Naomi's registration. See that? Don't think you're special, he sneered. Just another exhibit for us to handle. The stench of his cigarette smoke washed over Naomi's face. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself against the injustice. Stay exactly there, Shaw warned a young man who dared to step forward. Back off, or I'll cuff you too. The would-be Good Samaritan froze and retreated, eyes wide. A sharp snap sounded as Shaw clicked the handcuffs, closed metal on metal, echoing in the suddenly hushed lot. Each click was a declaration. She was being punished for her skin color, not any crime. But Naomi remained silent, knowing the cameras and witnesses would catch every moment. The scent of tobacco, the hiss of the radio, the heavy clang of the car door opening and shutting it, all formed the backdrop for this unmistakable display of racial profiling. Yet Naomi said nothing. She was building her case, brick by brick. In her mind echoed her parents' voices, her mother late at night, sewing clothes for her, insisting, "You will be respected." Her father's words from the barracks, "Stand tall, no matter what." Their sacrifices, the fire in her belly, fueled her resolve. And when the patrol car door slammed shut behind her, Naomi knew the real showdown was about to begin. She wasn't just facing one overconfident cop, she was standing up for every person of color ever pushed to the fringes. The moment the engine roared to life, she tensed for what came next, ready to flip the script and expose the truth. Stepping into the precinct, Naomi held her back straight even as the cold metal cuffs bit into her wrists. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, exposing every corner as Officer Shaw dragged her toward the intake desk. He plunged a hand into her leather tote without a word of courtesy, rifling through its contents. "You people always have something to hide," he snarled, assigning her guilt by skin color. Naomi stayed silent, her eyes reflecting unbroken resolve. Two young men who'd filmed the parking lot arrest whispered anxiously behind a partition, exchanging worried glances. A passing nurse paused, sighed softly at the sight of a black woman being treated like a criminal, then hurried on. Everything moved on autopilot. Paperwork stamped unverified, their notes reading uncooperative, and Naomi was ushered into the holding area without a single follow-up question. At the processing table, a white clerk barked orders: "Remove your shoes, take off your belt, and put all personal items on the counter." Naomi complied. She slipped out of her loafers and unlaced her belt, placing each item on the cold metal surface. The click of buckle and zipper echoed sharply, heightening the room's oppressive tension. The clerk avoided her gaze, dutifully scrawling 48-hour hold pending verification in bold letters. There was no space for her accountantly checkboxes: refused to identify and refused to cooperate. Shaw hovered close, eyes scanning for any hint of non-compliance, to log in his notebook. She was then escorted down a corridor lined with steel cells, each clang of her footsteps marking one more piece in the assembly line of racial profiling. Naomi silently reminded herself, "This isn't just my fight, it's the fight of every person of color who's ever been silenced." The scent of stale cigarette smoke mingled with antiseptic as she was led deeper into the block. When the heavy cell door slid shut, sealing her into a tiny room lit by a single bare bulb, Naomi knelt and placed her palms on the cool concrete floor. She closed her eyes and drew in a steady breath, feeling the weight of the cuffs, but also the weight of history of countless people crushed by prejudice. Around her, every hum of the air vent and drip from a leaky pipe formed the backdrop to a new resolve. This injustice would not end here. Within these walls, the real investigation into abuse of power was only just beginning. Inside the holding cell, the fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow on the yellowed walls, and the security camera overhead creaked as it slowly panned the room. Naomi sat upright on the metal bench, head slightly bowed, eyes fixed on the steel door. The beam of light illuminated every line on her face, highlighting the faint red marks at her wrists from the handcuffs. Outside, her registration papers stamped "unverified" lay abandoned among other documents. Every piece of paperwork was flawless, yet prejudice had rendered it meaningless. Footsteps retreated down the corridor, and Officer Shaw's voice crackled over the intercom. "Subject to be held 48 hours pending verification." His tone was icy, as though determined to extinguish any hope of release. No lawyer appeared. No one stepped forward to question the validity of her documents. Instead, the monotony of the intercom's beeps, the distant clatter of keyboards at the front desk, and the mechanical hum of the ventilation system enforced a valid procedure that tasted bitterly of injustice. In that moment, Naomi realized that institutional indifference was as cruel as overt bias. Under that unforgiving light, she recalled her mother's voice. "When the world turns its back, you must stand your ground." The ache in her wrists and the weariness in her limbs reminded her of her father's promise from battlefield days. "Justice won't come to you, you have to seize it." In this bleak cell, she understood that true courage was the silent strength to face tyranny without flinching. Time crawled by, each minute stretching into an eternity. Naomi eased her shoulders but kept her gaze steady on the door. Somewhere beyond these walls, her FBI colleagues combed through evidence and prepared to strike. With every chime of the intercom, every gust of cold air sneaking under the door, she felt a rising certainty. This darkness was temporary, and justice's dawn was within reach. Alone in that cramped cell, Naomi let a small smile touch her lips. Though prejudice restrained her body, her spirit remained free. When the intercom announced the shift change, she vowed silently, "Tomorrow, I will expose the truth." All night long, she counted each echo, and committed every second to memory, knowing that only by reclaiming her voice could she truly embrace justice. The next morning, Naomi was escorted into the hearing room at the Central Station Courthouse, a spacious chamber with gleaming wooden benches and a dark oak bench for the judge, all bathed in pale daylight. Officer Shaw shuffled to his feet, exhaustion etched into his hollowed cheeks, though his eyes still burned with bias. As the judge called the roll, Shaw immediately leaned forward. "Your Honor," he began in a clipped tone. The defendant displayed uncooperative behavior at the scene and failed to produce valid identification. He jabbed a finger at Naomi, punctuating his demand for punishment. Naomi sat erect, her gaze steely, surveying every corner of the courtroom. She said nothing, yet her presence spoke volumes. The court-appointed attorney, trembling, elderly man, simply nodded in agreement. "Yes, Your Honor," he stammered. "My client did refuse to present documents when asked. Not once did he challenge the accusation or inquire whether the documents even existed." The courtroom fell into an almost unbearable silence. The only sounds were the clerk's soft typing on a laptop and the shuffle of paper as attorneys consulted their files. Spectators avoided Naomi's eyes, casting furtive glances at one another as if to ask, "Are we really judging a crime or reinforcing prejudice?" The tension was so thick it felt tangible. Shaw pressed on. "She refused to allow a search of her bag, refused to provide ID, and resisted lawful orders. Every repetition of refused landed like a hammer blow against Naomi's dignity. The judge rapped his gavel. "Present your evidence," he commanded. Shaw slid forward a sheet marked uncooperative and unverified, then leaned back, as though he'd completed his duty. Naomi closed her eyes briefly, thinking, "It's all been staged." She knew her paperwork had already been authenticated by the FBI, but no one here would allow her to speak. The ticking of the courtroom clock echoed like a reminder. Justice can be manipulated, but the truth cannot stay buried forever. When Shaw finally sat down, the silence grew even heavier. The judge frowned, scanning the files before him. The clerk's fingers danced across the keys, but his eyes betrayed doubt. Naomi opened her eyes, her look penetrating the barrier between prejudice and true justice. She refused to fight with words. Her silent strength was a more powerful statement than any defense could be. At that moment, faint sirens wailed in the distance. FBI backup was arriving. Heads turned toward the door in sudden anticipation. Naomi drew a deep breath, bracing herself for the dramatic turn of events to comfort that, even when constrained, justice has the power to shatter the chains of prejudice. As Shaw grandly repeated, "Many black women like you have been driving stolen cars all over town," the courtroom's tension snapped. Naomi calmly drew her badge from her inner pocket. FBI. Internal Affairs Sand let its metallic gleam catch the overhead light. Time seemed to freeze, the rustle of papers, the halt of the video camera, even the court reporter's pen stopped mid-tap. A stunned silence turned into electric shock. Shaw's face went ashen, his voice trembling. "You need." But Naomi had already stepped forward to the witness stand. Holding the badge high at eye level with Shaw, she announced, "I am an FBI agent assigned to investigate you for abuse of power and racial profiling." Every eye in the room snapped to Shaw, the once authoritative officer now looking like the accused at the bar. Shaw stammered, "That's fake ID." But Naomi shook her head. Her evidence was irrefutable. The security camera's lens tracked her, its feed broadcasting to the monitors outside the courtroom. The court clerk froze, the uncooperative form fluttering to the desk. Shaw's own accusations had become the proof of his bias, inked permanently in the record. Naomi then addressed the judge. "I request the immediate suspension of this officer and an independent inquiry into all his actions and records. You may verify my credentials, but I have already gathered too much evidence." The judge's expression drained of color. He had never expected the defendant to turn prosecutor. At that moment, the courtroom door burst open as two FBI agents entered with case files in hand. One whispered to Naomi, "We've secured the surveillance footage. Shaw is officially relieved of duty." Shaw recoiled, shoulders slumped, the realization dawning that his badge held no power against the truth. The gallery erupted in hushed excitement, journalists leaning forward, bystanders exchanging footage on their phones. Naomi inclined her head in gratitude. Her stand wasn't just for herself, but for every person silenced by injustice. In that historic moment, prejudice collided with genuine justice, and the real journey to expose the truth had only just begun. The city that never seemed to sleep fell eerily silent as the morning headlines blared, "FBI launches investigation into Officer Shaw." Within hours, Shaw was placed on administrative leave, and authorities ordered a full audit of all records he'd touched: land seizures in minority neighborhoods, altered case files, and missing evidence logs. The press descended, and public outrage swelled into a tidal wave of demands for accountability. Those who had once stayed silent began to come forward, sharing stories of power abused, unlawful detentions, coerced confessions, and families displaced without recourse. At the police department's press briefing, local officials could no longer downplay the scandal. One spokesperson admitted, "We've never seen tampering on this scale." Reporters combed through dozens of cases, victims held for days without charge, investigation reports sanitized and stamped, closed. The public, long skeptical of behind-the-scenes cover-ups, now held proof documents, videos, and first-hand testimonies. Victims' mothers who lost land in flood zones, veterans released after baseless 3-day detentions, even defense attorneys threatened for questioning crime control methods joined forces online under hashtags like Expose Abuse and Justice Now, sharing hundreds of personal accounts. The expose abuse movement spread like wildfire. Human rights groups organized forums, drafted proposals to require body cameras, mandate anti-bias training, and publicly release all arrest and interrogation records. They called for a statewide legal audit, compelling every law enforcement agency to answer for past misconduct. During Shaw's pre-trial suspension, citizens monitored every development, posting updates to city forums and emailing legislators. After work, small protests formed downtown with signs reading, "Justice for All," and "Stop Racial Profiling," bearing Naomi Ellis's image alongside other victims. Never before had a campaign for justice and legal accountability grown this swiftly. From a single wrongful arrest, the truth ignited a movement proving that, even in a complacent system, justice can rise when people refuse to remain silent. The next chapters promise historic policy reforms and a landmark public trial. The entire city seemed to be holding its breath. The probe widened into a full-scale unraveling of a covert network spanning from low-level clerks to high-ranking officials. Every clean-to-rot dossier those off, the book's files crafted to bury inconvenient evidence, was laid bare under relentless scrutiny. Office by office, investigators uncovered altered arrest warrants, doctored reports, and erased video footage. Those who'd trafficked in abuse of power found themselves dodging subpoenas and changing their stories. Among the first to emerge was Felicia Grants, the single mother whose harrowing 3-hour detention had long been dismissed as routine. She took the stand before a packed review panel, recounting the moment she was forced out of her car and searched on its hidden incident that had vanished from official records. Her testimony triggered a cascade of appeals. Courts agreed to re-examine dozens of tainted convictions, vacating judgments against individuals who'd never committed the crimes they'd been forced to confess. Federal oversight stepped in decisively, establishing a special task force charged with restoring reputations and arranging compensation for victims of the clean-to-rot scheme. Led by the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, the task force moved swiftly to identify every case touched by the unit's corrupt methods. Restitution checks were drafted, expungement motions filed, and formal apologies issued in courtrooms and press statements alike. Across the region, the once impenetrable wall shielding abusive officers and complicit administrators crumbled under the weight of incontrovertible proof. Payroll records showing overtime paid for archive maintenance on suppressed files, email chains detailing orders to omit exculpatory evidence, and the infamous C2R operational log revealing directives to neutralize threats to powerful interests. Even the most resolute denials gave way when confronted with meticulously catalogued exhibits. By the end of the investigation's second quarter, public trust began to inch back. Community leaders who had shepherded rallies and online campaigns now joined the task force in rolling out policy reforms, mandatory body cameras, civilian review boards, and transparent file management protocols. The sheer force of documented evidence had done what protests and op-eds alone could not. It smashed the dark fortress of privilege, proving that in a system committed to truth, abuse cannot hide indefinitely. The battle for justice didn't end in the courtroom. Back at FBI headquarters, Naomi Ellis assembled thousands of pages of evident internal memos, financial records, witness statements to prepare the next phase, criminal indictments of those who abused their badges, comprehensive reform of police training curricula, and robust community oversight mechanisms. Former bystanders who once stayed silent now stepped forward as key witnesses, their testimonies adding fresh layers to the case. Across the department, policy working groups drafted new guidelines on racial bias, evidence handling, and de-escalation tactics. Civilian review boards were established in every precinct, empowered to audit use-of-force incidents and review complaint investigations. The DOJ's Special Task Force coordinated with state legislators to secure funding for body-worn cameras and anti-bias certification for every officer. Naomi and her colleagues understood that true justice demands more than convictions on paper. It requires the courage to uncover hard truths and the persistence to hold institutions accountable. As Felicia Grants and other survivors lent their voices to the reform effort, a powerful message emerged. Even the mightiest structures of power can be pierced by the light of collective resolve. In the end, every citizen holds the capacity to be a Naomi or a Felicia, raising a beacon of truth that drives out the shadows of prejudice. Justice is not an abstract ideal. It is forged in acts of bravery and in the unyielding pursuit of evidence. 12 months have passed since Naomi Ellis's badge illuminated the darkest corners of power. The FBI's Clean to Rot task force has secured convictions against 10 former officers and administrators, and over 1,200 tainted convictions have been overturned statewide. Police departments have adopted mandatory body camera legislation, and every officer now completes a certified anti-bias program before hitting the street. Civilian Review Board SUNS, a distant ideal, meet monthly to audit use of force reports and ensure transparency. Community trust, measured in independent surveys, has climbed from a historic low of 32 to 68% satisfaction in police accountability. Neighborhood watch groups partner directly with precinct liaisons, channeling concerns into tangible policy recommendations. City councils across the region have earmarked funds for mental health crisis teams, diverting nonviolent calls away from armed patrols. Naomi, newly promoted to special agent in charge of the DOJ's Civil Rights Intelligence Unit, now mentors a cohort of incoming investigators. She and Felicia Grants, whose groundbreaking testimony sparked the re-examination's co-host workshops for survivors of profiling, empowering them to navigate legal recourse. Their collaboration has inspired sister cities in 3 other states to launch similar review initiatives. Yet the work continues. Reports of isolated misconduct still surface, and grassroots coalitions press for deeper cultural change. Naomi's final memo to the Attorney General reads, "Justice is not a destination but a journey of relentless vigilance. 1 year on, the legacy endures. When individuals choose courage over comfort, even the most entrenched systems can be reshaped by light. In communities reborn from doubt, every citizen is now a guardian of justice, proof that when the truth is set free, it transforms us all."